I'm Michael Shaulov. I'm the CEO and founder of Fireblocks. For those here who are not familiar with Fireblocks, basically what we do, we provide an infrastructure and a platform for mostly financial institutions to work with crypto. So we provide all the wallet infrastructure and settlement and so on. I think one of the reasons that people invite me to talk about kind of our journey is that in a very short period of time, we kind of build a company to go from zero, which was basically 2018, to servicing over 1,600 clients right now globally. About $200 billion of transactions per month, 600 employees, and the last valuation that we raised back in January this year was at $8 billion, right? So this kind of journey in 4 years is a pretty interesting journey. So, but I think it's always easy to talk about those journeys and only tell about the success. Where actually, I think the most interesting parts in the entrepreneurial journeys are actually lie in the failure. So how many people here in the audience are either entrepreneurs, want to be entrepreneurs, or managers that want to basically pull really big things at work? Okay, so pretty much the right audience to hear this. So the interesting thing I think about my journey, kind of sort of fast forward, is that about 20 years ago I started in the Israeli Cyber Command, basically dealing with cybersecurity. And then about 11 years ago, I started my previous company that was dealing with mobile security. It got acquired by a pretty big company in the cybersecurity space called Checkpoint. And then after 3 years, I started Fireblocks in 2018. What people actually don't tell other people, and I think this is kind of like the dirty secret, is that similar to this kind of famous phrase of Tolstoy that, all the successful families look the same, and all the poor families, they look very different. In entrepreneurship, I think all the failing startups and all the failing ideas, you know why they failed. All the successful startups, you actually don't know what made them exactly successful, right? But I think that along the way, actually before I started my previous company, I had a lot of attempts to do startups, and which led to a lot of failures. So we had a business that was trying to ship. When I was in high school, we had a business that was trying to ship hookahs to Europe. We had a business that was doing distributed storage. We had a business that was trying to do a recommendation engine for fashion, kind of somewhere between 2005 to 2011, and all of those things failed. And before I started my previous, when I started my previous startup, and when the one that before that failed, I was trying to sort of understand and analyze why we couldn't actually get those ideas into something that is meaningful, into something that actually was able to penetrate the market and actually solve solve problems for people, raise capital, and all the things that you heard in the previous panels in terms of what you need to do as an entrepreneur. And one day when we were actually shutting down the previous company, a friend of mine called me and he told me how's things going? I told him it's not going very well. He told me, hey, did you read those books about how to really build startups? And then he sent me, it was 2011, he sent me a list of books, and the first book that I actually read over there was a book that is called 4 Steps to Epiphany. It's kind of a pretty famous book that I recommend everyone to read, but the idea about that book is that essentially it sort of teaches you a fairly detailed process on how you understand what the customer needs, what the idea that you need to bring the market, and how do you basically bootstrap that idea from a product standpoint until you get to this kind of really accurate product market fit, which solves the problem to the customer, that you understand how to market it, that you understand how you start scaling from that point. And the core of that idea is a series of iterative steps that eventually helps you to identify a really clear pain point that the clients have, and essentially iterate until you sort of get a series of specific answers about how you solve that problem. Now, in general, it sounds pretty simple, but the main concept over there is that they actually dissect different startups into three different markets. You can either start a startup in a non-existing market, you can start a startup in an existing market, and you can start a startup by resegmenting a market. Each one of those markets actually have a very special characteristics in terms of how you need to basically activate and go through those processes. And I think, like, unfortunately for me, I was always kind of chasing after ideas that are in new markets and in evolving markets, which was really the story about Fireblocks. So when we started Fireblocks in 2018, what basically brought me into understanding that there is an opportunity is that before that, I was really dealing with mostly cybersecurity, and we as part of my previous position, we did an investigation on a breach that happened in South Korea, where allegedly the North Koreans hacked 4 exchanges in South Korea. They stole $200 million of Bitcoin and basically ran away with it. And that basically made me kind of understand that there are, basically 2 opportunities. One, that blockchain is going to be transformative rails for the financial system. And the second concept was that there was definitely, like, sort of lack of infrastructure. Now, similar to what was described in the previous panel, when I sort of told my friends that we're going to pursue that idea, and that was already, like, sort of my second, I was already, was perceived as a successful entrepreneur that already sold the previous company. Most people told me that I'm crazy, that I'm going to waste the next couple of years of my life, and that, like, this idea has no merit. What really convinced us to pursue that idea was actually following that process. So fairly quickly, we went into a fairly global market of participants that were operating in crypto in 2018, exchanges, market makers, over-the-counter desks, fintech apps, and so on. And we started to talk with them to understand their pain points in terms of what was not working for them. And in that point in time, actually, the custody problem or the wallet problem was kind of like, reasonably well understood. There were a bunch of companies that were doing that, mostly using things like cold storage, which is basically wallets that are not connected to the internet. And what we started to identify and hear in those conversations is that people actually had no issue with storing the asset. People had an issue with transacting with the assets, with moving it, with kind of like sort of extracting the full potential of what blockchain technology was supposed to bring to the market. So we really followed that process of having conversations with them, creating, it wasn't even a prototype. We actually sort of created a deck that shows like mocks of the product. And we started to go to all those clients and ask them like, hey, if we will be able to solve this pain point for you, that you can actually move those, your assets, your digital assets from place to place without getting a heart attack or without losing all of it, would you buy our solution? And after 10, 15 of those conversations, we sort of started to understand that we're kind of getting like this really clear message of, if you're going to solve it for us, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars, right? Or euros, whatever the geography was. And that was basically the point in time where we say, okay, we nailed something, we're going to build it, we're going to pursue that, although all of our friends thinking that it's like a really crazy idea. So we started working on that, and I don't know how many of you were following crypto in 2018, but it was a pretty bad timing, right? So basically, when we started the company, Bitcoin was at $10,000. By the time that our product was ready, Bitcoin was at $3,500, right? Out of the 10 people that actually signed up to be our design partners and be our customers, 6 of them was out of business. So I was like calling them, telling them, hey, the product is ready. Can we come and install it and you guys can start using it? They were telling me like, listen, Michael, unfortunately, there is no longer an operation over here, and you can and that was quite painful. What really helped us during that point is kind of sticking to, I would say, first principles, right? So what we understood at that point is that kind of believing in the future of it and sort of driving through the dust until the market picked up for us in 2019. And out of those like 10 design partners, the 4 design partners that actually worked with us, when the market turned and when the market basically moved into growing stage, those guys were at the top of the market. And when we launched, we basically had the design partners that were considered to be the most important players in the market. And from there, kind of the entire build and the entire motion was sort of downhill, right? So I think that that if we, coming back to a lot of the challenges that we are experiencing today in a very volatile environment, in a market that is very uncertain, where it's very hard to raise funding, I think that people should basically understand that I think that if you really following through on the process, eventually you just need to stick to your guns. You need to basically drive pretty straight through the dust. And at some point, the market will turn and, there is a high probability that you can actually find yourself kind of at the top of the mountain, being able to build all of that from a very powerful position. This is sort of our story, in terms of how we managed to build what we build. And clearly looking forward, we are in the inception of this industry, so looking forward to really build all the rails that most of the financial institutions will work on in the next decade or so. Thank you so much.